resignation, and if we did, I don't know that I would want to exercise a forceful expulsion. But I think that to make a moral statement, that, you know, if I had known this earlier in the year, I certainly would have urged us to set up much different kind of relationship and different courses of action for the legislator involved, including some mandates that we could have requested in terms of training or counseling that would have said that we as a body are imposing that and not leaving it to the individual to say, I'll do a process, and that process is something that none of us know about, as far as I'm aware. So I don't think a person who is in that situation should be left to devise their own course of action if they believe that something serious has happened. Having missed an opportunity to take what would have, I hope, been more constructive action, I don't have any place left to go at this point, except to feel that I would want a resignation. And I think that that should come from the entire caucus. I think it should come from the entire body.
Legislator Green?
I think everyone's entitled to their own opinion. My sense is that I have no evidence that there's been any repeat of the behavior. There has been action taken, and I would absolutely not support requesting a resignation.
Can we ask for clarification of what the action taken was?
Were you referring to the actions?
Yeah, removal from committees, but on the part of Legislator Rodriguez, he did go to at least one meeting, you know, and I agree. I wish we had a protocol, and that there was more you know, how to say this, I think that the issue is similar to the issue of addiction, and we have programs to send people if they have, but it's a newer, it's ancient. The problem is ancient, but the manifestations and the shift in our culture is very recent, and it's not, you know, there's not a clear-cut course of action. But the fact that, to my knowledge, none of that behavior has been repeated, and there's been action taken, I would not favor. So I think everyone has to make that decision for themselves. But I just want to put that on the table.
Legislator Acker?
I think it's important to speak in unity for the institution that this was a wrong, and that we have zero tolerance for sexual harassment. This harassment had gone on for a period of time. It wasn't just one isolated incident. And I think to speak clearly to the victims, even now there's discussion about looking at the testimony of the victims. You know, these victims were very brave in speaking to these lawyers because they feared retaliation. And there's a clear pattern of retaliation. So I think for me, given the pattern of behavior, it's really important for the institution and really for the county, you know, to come out, which the county has under Brian's leadership, to say this is unacceptable and we're not going to tolerate it. And I think we as a caucus have not done a very good job of that. And I'll go on record and say that. And now you've got a record. So I'll leave it at that. You all have to do what you think is right. But I want to be clear that I'm on record as thinking this is problematic behavior, and that we cannot demand and compel anyone to step down. But we can speak as a body about the moral wrong, and the legal wrong for that matter. and it's actually factually not true. The stuff that's described in that report is quid pro quo sexual harassment among other things. And there has been a clear legal set of precedents to deal with it.
You did your hand up.
Yeah, unless there's somebody else who wants to go first. I think that there are training programs. Through the nonprofit that I work, it just happened that this week we had our sexual harassment training. Some of the examples given in the training were this. Now, we're not a workplace like that, like the workplaces that were covered by this training, but I think we can emulate and, in some ways lead. I'm very much influenced by the fact that I listened to hours of interviews that were aired publicly on Hillary Harvey's show, where she interviewed both Legislator Rodriguez and an individual who came forward and spoke publicly about her experience, and that really moved me at the time. The reports that are the instances that are included in the current report seem to be similar to something that would have been very bad if it were just one instance. And I've spoken with my younger friends and colleagues, women, and they use the language of zero tolerance. I wasn't initially in that space because I came up through a lot of male-dominated professional training and circumstances, and really experienced some things that now would count as sexual harassment that at the time I laughed off, because that's what you did to show that you were tough enough to be in that realm. But when my younger colleagues say, well, why should you have to put up with any of that? And I don't have any answer to that. So I have shifted my position. My younger colleagues are right. It should be that, one instance of this I think would be very, very problematic, and we have a pattern. So if we, I agree that we're kind of coming as a culture to learn how to deal with this, and earlier in the year, if we had known the problem was as severe as we now know, we may have tried to use some other mechanisms, like, requesting either a resignation or a training program or counseling, as I said before. At this point, to ask for that for somebody who's here for 2 months and then is not going to be here, it's not a reasonable intervention. So that's why I say I feel like I don't have anything left. And the reason I don't have anything left is largely because a person who is our colleague, when we ask for the full range of things that could be coming out, didn't give us that. And so now we have a lot more. And I don't feel like we have all the details, and that hinders us, but we had enough. I felt like we had enough in the spring. But now, how do we not at least say, we think this is behavior that legislators should not engage in? And though it may not have happened since the beginning of the year, it happened during legislative functions.
So, I mean, my comment was public. I made it on
Yes.
Monday after reviewing the information that I received, or I saw on the Freeman Friday night. My comment was that I personally, at this time, did not believe that it was in the best interest of Legislator Rodriguez's district for him to continue to serve with a message of zero tolerance, and again, obviously commending those who participated in the investigation. But I did make sure to preface my statement that it was my own belief, because I was not speaking on behalf of the caucus, because, I mean, just in terms of the caucus, a caucus statement can't go out unless it comes from the entire caucus. Based on comments, other comments, I've seen a varying viewpoint of comments both publicly and in the presence of members. I don't believe that there's that that agreement, which unfortunately I think this is an issue where people do just have different levels of agreements. I have spoken with, I mean, it has been confirmed by council that there is, obviously, I don't know if you said it or not, there is no mechanism to where a legislator can be removed from office unless per public officers law, which is the conviction of a felony. So I think, I mean, that's, I think though, I hear what you, definitely hear what you're saying, and you have every right to ask for that. But that is currently, you know, the situation. I don't even know in terms of, and then you also mentioned in terms of the legislature as a whole, I do not know. The only person I've seen comment on the issue from our colleagues in the Republican caucus is Legislator Haynes. There has been no other comment that I'm aware of from their caucus. So I think that's just kind of the situation we are right now, but I don't, at that point, I don't know in the sense of if I understood what your request was, if that action, you know, can be done, if there is a different opinions at different levels, except for what, I mean, personally, I made my statement, and every legislator has the right to make their statement. Unless you guys have any suggestions of how you see.
Well, but just to be clear, there's a difference between making an individual statement as a legislator.
No, I understand that.
And the moral force of a body.
No, I don't disagree with
So,
that
but I
whatsoever.
think we should be clear about that.
And
Because if we're not gonna do it, that speaks volumes.
If legislators wanna approach me about it, think about it.
Well, I guess the question would be, what would be the options that we would have for expressing that sentiment in a collective way? And I think that could be a motion on the floor that people vote on. And I don't know if there is another way to
a motion or a resolution?
Well, a resolution would take time to create, and so I don't know. I mean, this is one of the reasons to discuss it as a body. But it seems to me that we can, under Robert's rules, do many things to make a statement on something.
Mm-hmm.
And if we feel that it's urgent, I think the format for that is usually a motion. So that's what I'm going from, open to other ideas. And I think knowing we either do or do not have a mechanism, then we have to decide, you know, whether it has to be unanimous in order for us to feel like we're gonna choose that option, or whether we wanna have people who do feel strongly be able to say, you know, I vote for this. This is the, you know, my public expression of this, not as an individual, but hopefully as a member of at least a majority of the body. Recognizing that there may be individuals that might not agree.
Is that something council can, you know, I believe you're asking council what possible
Mechanism.
It's a motion.
motion?
Yeah,
Motion
just to
to
be clear
censure.
on some of the language, we can work on the details, but a motion and a resolution is the same. A resolution is what comes out of a motion that passes. The only question is that, you know, can we write a resolution beforehand, or do we have to think of it on the floor? But when you move something, you're moving a resolution, and if it gets adopted, then you have an adopted resolution. So they're basic, functionally, they're the same thing, different stages. I think what you're struggling with is what sort of a resolution do you want? And if, of course, if it's on the floor, it's not a caucus thing anymore, it's the legislature, and you either look at individual votes or a passed resolution is one for the whole legislature. So I'm just throwing out the ground rules here, I'm not commenting on, there are, you know, there's other issues as well, obviously, what people are saying, but I just want you to understand what you're talking about. It's a lot
Thank you,
simpler
that's
than you're
helpful.
thinking. And the other thing is that there's obviously a tradition and rules that if you make a motion for a resolution, there's an expectation it's gonna go to committee. So if you wanna do things in an emergency, there are rules for that too, but we're pretty far along the road on that. So you have to establish that why we should look at this on the floor and not refer it to some committee like Rules and Rules.
Well, because it's October and December is 2 months away.
I could get back to you on whether that's sufficient, but I just want you to think in those terms again.
So I guess I was imagining that we might, for example, go into committee of the whole at the legislative meeting next week, and having gone into committee as a whole, agree to suspend our rules to be able to address a resolution for censure, or a motion for censure, or resolution.
Okay, the rules.
That might be a mechanism that we have available.
I believe that there is a way under Robert's rules to just have a simple motion to censure, which is a motion that can be made on the floor. Now, arguably, it's for conduct traditionally undertaken during a meeting, but we could say the receipt of a report is conduct that could suffice to warrant such a motion. It wouldn't require any committee, it could just be a motion to censure. Now, what does that do? It's just a public rebuke. It's a majority vote. It is debatable, can't be amended, can't be reconsidered.
Reverend Collins?
Has any of us really talked with Legislator Rodriguez?
I've spoken with him a couple of times since Friday evening.
I spoke with
Can
him also.
anybody say what he feels about this?
That he was not going to resign, same as the comment that was made to the Freeman.
And I only ask because while I don't condone the things that he's being accused of or have been proven, I do stand as one who has walked with, spent a lot of time working with, and I know that regardless of what he might have done, he did his best within us. I respect that. What we decide to do, I want to make sure that whatever we do, we are considering right now we have someone whose history and future have been tore to pieces. So how we deal with that as one of us, because, but for the way things work in this world today, almost any one of us can get caught up in something. I feel like a culture and a habit are more to this than any meant harm to anybody.
Chairman Bartel,
Habits.
sorry.
Have caught Hector up in this mess.
Chairman Bartel, sorry.
I have to say is,
Long pauses.
he wouldn't tell us so that we could do maybe another way, but I'm really concerned about how we throw him off now.
Chairman Bartel, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just, in answering Reverend Collins' question, I spoke to Hector, but it was primarily to call to tell him I was taking him off committees. I don't know if everyone read my statement, so I've made a statement as chair, but like Jonathan's statement, it was a statement just from me, and I did what I could do within my power as chair. But what's being contemplated now is something different, and I'm aware of the gravity of that, as both Legislator Nolan and Eckert have said. I mean, Legislator Eckert's point about the gravity of the body making a statement is different than any one of us alone, no matter what position we're in making a statement.
I guess, I have to be forthright, like what's been absent in many of our conversations is empathy for the victims. And I don't hear a lot of that. And that's really disappointing. This is a situation that we're in that it didn't have to be this way. If Hector had been forthright and truthful with us at any point, we would not be in this situation. It could have been dealt with. There could have been a forthright reckoning that didn't require him not to run for re-election or to be in a situation where now calling for resignation. But that's not the case. When he was confronted with these allegations, there was a consistent no, this isn't me. This didn't occur. This is not how I saw it. And so this is a terrible situation. I feel for Hector. I truly, honestly do. And I think there was a different path here, and he didn't take it, and it was foolish. Now we're in a different situation, and I consistently hear, I don't hear a lot about the women. And that just, yeah, that troubles me. That really, really troubles me.
Reverend, I feel for everybody in the middle of this. Everybody's been hurt. Everybody is still hurting. Because if it happened to you, the things that the ladies are saying happened to them and have been proven happened to some of the things that's been through, there's pain there. My only worry, how do we say to them, we understand and we want to do what's right, but I feel with all my heart, knowing where somebody comes from, knowing the nature that this is personality. Okay, what's been free, what's been easy, there are some men that can turn it off because they see it coming. There are others that this is the way I've been all my life, this is the way I've been laughing and joking, and I didn't see any harm, I didn't feel any harm, and they cannot turn it off as easily. I think all of that is, when we start considering this whole thing, all of that is a part, because whether we demand or ask for resignation or not, this man has got to try to live, having lost something that I think his whole life is built on. Okay, that's a heck of a punishment, but it's there. The mere fact, I would love to have him stand up and truly say to all of these women, I'm sorry for what I've done, sorry how I hurt you. I realize that I have now something I didn't realize before. I would love to hear him physically say that, and then try to get counseling or whatever to change his normal functions the way he is. But I think all of us, it depends on the way you were brought up, the way you learn life. And the reason I say that, I know, we were talking earlier, I'm a hugger and a kisser. I greet women with a hug and a kiss. Doesn't mean a thing other than, how are you doing today? I'm glad to see you. If you show me that didn't fit right, I'm gonna back up quicker than you can get the words out of your mouth. But I've learned that because of life. But the habit, the first thing I do is reach out to grab you. And that's nothing but all of that. And I think it's also a matter of being cognizant of the changes that are made, being willing to accept when somebody lets you know, or when somebody witnesses and says, the fact that I lost a job because it was brought up, that should have been a spark that says, gotta change my way, gotta be more careful about how I talk to people. All those things are part of what we're dealing with, and I don't think we're gonna solve nothing tonight other than trying to figure out, leaving here trying to figure out a way to say it, to get it to happen. I realize that the stain, should we hold on, is on the whole body. Basically, they were willing to submit and allow him to continue on regardless. That's what we end up dealing with. So it's not, I don't think it's as easy a decision to make as just saying, I think that he needs to go. I think that we need to make a statement to let the world. I'm not so much worrying about the statement I make to the world as the statement I make to those women that we feel for what is going on. We're not in agreement. I'll gladly stand and make that statement to anybody. I'll gladly make the statement to Hector. Hector, I think for your good and for the good of the body of the legislature, you need to step aside. It says to the whole world, I realize I've made some mistakes, and I want to make amends. I want to go forward. I would love to hear him stand and say that himself. And then, once all of that's done, these are the things that happen. Why did they happen? Because the body of people around me got me to see where I stood and what needed to happen.
Yeah, can I just,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna quickly say, I don't think Hector's situation is beyond redemption. I really don't. I think there are plenty of things that he could do to turn things around and have a career, and I hope that he does. He's got a lot to offer public service, but it first requires a recognition and a reckoning with what occurred. And I think I'll just say this, most women know the difference between a benign hug and something more nefarious. It pathologizes women to suggest that they don't. So yeah, lots of men are huggers. I just went over to Clark and I just touched his arm, right? That's not what's going on here. And I think to characterize it in that way is really, it diminishes the claims and the harm that these women have suffered.
Okay. And I just wanted to be clear, just from council, that just so what was said before in terms of a motion through Robert's rules. So the motion is for the censor. There are no whereases or resolves or anything. It's simply it's not a call. It does not carry the. I just don't want there to be a misconstruction that a censorship carries the weight. However, it's simply you're rebuking the actions of a member. I just want to make sure.
But there's a collective vote.
Yeah. I just wanted to make sure there wasn't confusion because we were talking about it within the same talks of. I just wanted to make sure.
And it's debatable, so
And
which means that you can make comments.
It's debatable by all. However, the subject of the censorship cannot vote. Just so.
The subject is. Oh, I see.
Yeah, but they can. Anyone can debate.
Right.
So I just want to also be clear that if there were, through this training that I just recently redid in another context, a single episode of an unwelcome touching, it is not in itself harassment. It's confusion or, but then if there's a no and that's, an indication that it's unwelcome, then that has to be respected. And we do have documentation through text messages of no and continuing behavior. And I have seen some of those, not as part of this investigation or report, but in relationship to the media reporting that an investigation that was going on. And that's part of what has moved me so much. The other thing is that Legislator Rodriguez apparently just reiterated his previous apology, which says, if I have harmed anyone. And this is not an if I have harmed anyone situation. It seems like what Reverend Collins is talking about of that moment of really getting it. Oh, I did something that has injured somebody, hasn't really happened. And one of the reasons I feel compelled to ask for, if censure is what we can do, then censure, is that one of the ways people come to know that their behavior is unacceptable is if their closest colleagues say to them, this behavior is unacceptable. And as I say, early in the year, we might have had some less forceful ways to do that, but I don't see any at this point. I would be very welcoming if there's another way to make that message. And maybe censure is good in that it's less than a call for resignation, and those who want to call for resignation still can do that on their own as statements. But that we censure the behavior that is reported and that we have come to know about through multiple means, that does seem to me to be a minimum of what I feel called to do as a moral person for a colleague and a friend, somebody that I have wanted to be in a friendship with
I would be in agreement with censure.
Yeah, and if I may, I just think that to make a statement in a split vote of any kind on a resignation isn't good for us. You know, it's not saying to these women that we understand what's happened here. I think you would probably get more votes for the censure, and it'd be more unanimous, and I think that's important.
Would you like me to reach out to the minority leader in the morning, and ask him what his thought would be?
If it's the sense of the group, yeah, I think that it would be a way to tell the women who have been injured that we get it at least, and that we're doing the best we can to try to get our colleagues to get it.
I like that.
And I'll get back to you. All right, thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Adjourn?
It's just caucus, so we don't have a formal agenda.